Evolution is supposed to take millions of years, but the Tyranids perfected it in a single generation, and now they're coming to prove that humanity's 10,000 years of survival means absolutely nothing against an intelligence that learns from every world it devours. They are not an invasion. They are the end of the conversation. They are evolution weaponized, pointed at the galaxy's throat, and they have already won on 1,000 worlds you will never hear about, because no one survived to scream the warning. The sky turns the color of infected flesh. The oceans boil with alien spores. Your children stop recognizing you as human. This is not metaphor. This is documentation. This is what happens when the Great Devourer arrives, and it is coming for every world that still believes it matters. I spent 11 years hunting Xenos threats before I understood what the Tyranids truly represented. Orcs I could comprehend. They wanted violence and glory. The Aldari pursued survival, clinging to Empire's remnants. Even chaos made sense in its madness, because it had once been human. But the Tyranids forced me to confront a truth the Imperium will never admit. We are not the protagonists of this story. We are not special. We are not chosen. We are biomass. We are fuel. We are data to be processed and consumed, and when they finish with us, nothing will remain but the contribution our atoms make to their continued existence. The first world I watched die was called Graven's Hope. The name is ironic now. From orbit, the planet looked diseased. Purple and crimson growth spread across continents like infection through flesh, pulsing with a rhythm that made my stomach turn. Our auger arrays reported something impossible. The planet's total biomass had increased 17% in 96 hours. Matter does not spontaneously generate. Physics does not work that way. But the Tyranids do not obey our physics. They rewrite it, one world at a time. I led the ground extraction team because I needed to see it. Reports and data. Slates do not convey truth. Only witness does. The drop, pod descent felt wrong from the moment we breached the cloud layer. The smell hit first, even through rebreather units. Sweet and rotting simultaneously, like fruit fermenting inside a corpse. The air itself was thick, viscous, as though we descended into a stomach rather than an atmosphere. When we slammed onto the landing pad, the ground moved beneath us. Not seismic activity. The rockcrete itself had been transformed into something that could feel our weight. The city was dying in ways that defied every tactical manual I had studied. The Tyranids had not invaded the Hive. They had become the Hive. Streets choked with fibrous growth that pulsed with bioluminescent veins, conducting nutrients towards some central processing node. Buildings sprouted chitinous armor and membranous sacs that throbbed with developing organisms. The entire environment watched us through 1 billion microscopic sensors embedded in the air itself. We were not entering enemy territory. We were walking into something's digestive system, and it knew we were there. We found her in a ministorum chapel. An old woman, lay preacher, hands clasped in prayer before the altar. Her eyes were open but unfocused. She hummed a hymn I did not recognize. I called out, identified myself as Imperial military, assured her we were there for extraction. She continued humming. Then she stopped, turned her head toward me with a motion too fluid, too serpentine, and smiled. Her teeth had changed, no longer yellowed stumps but rows of sharp, efficient cutting surfaces designed for rendering organic material. She spoke one word in a voice that harmonized with itself, producing multiple tones simultaneously. Hungry. Then she exploded, not fire, not chemical explosive. Her body simply came apart in a spray of acid and barbed flesh, hooks that punched through the trooper beside me. He screamed for exactly 4 seconds before the acid dissolved his throat. The woman's remains continued moving on the floor, individual chunks of tissue writhing toward us with purposeful intent. We incinerated everything within 10 meters and retreated. But the damage was done. That woman had not been killed and reanimated. She had been transformed while still alive. her biology hijacked and repurposed into a weapon system. The Tyranids had not sent forces to that chapel. They had turned the faithful themselves into ammunition. The smell stayed. It always stays. Deeper into the hive, the true scope of transformation became apparent. The Tyranids do not simply kill a world's inhabitants. They disassemble the entire biosphere down to the molecular level, extracting every resource and repurposing it into more Tyranids. The purple growth we saw from orbit was a carpet of digestive organisms, microscopic factories breaking down organic and inorganic matter alike. Even our blessed ceramite armor showed pitting and corrosion after 2 hours of exposure. The planet was being eaten alive, and the meal included everything from soil bacteria to the girders holding up hive spires. The governor's palace had been transformed into something between fortress and feeding station. Inside, his household guard lay arranged in neat rows along the main corridor, stripped of all flesh but skeletons positioned in parade formation. A message, though from whom I could not say. The governor himself sat on his throne, perfectly intact, perfectly alive, and perfectly insane. He spoke in rapid, cheerful tones about the wonderful guests who had come to visit, how they had shown him the truth of efficiency and the beauty of purpose. His eyes were his own, still recognizably human. That made it worse. The Tyranids had not broken his mind. They had shown him something that made him choose collaboration. We extracted him despite his protests. The journey back took 3 hours that felt like decades. The hive fought us at every step. Corridors that had been clear were now choked with bone growths and contracting muscle fibers. Doorways sealed themselves with rapidly hardening resin. The air grew thicker until we waded through it like syrup. And through it all, we heard the singing. From everywhere and nowhere, a chorus sharing a single melody with no identifiable source. The Tyranids were singing to each other, or perhaps to us, in frequencies that made our bones ache and our thoughts scatter like insects fleeing light. 7 of 12 made it to extraction. The governor was unconscious, sedated after he tried to bite through his restraints to escape back into the hive. As we launched, I watched through picked feeds as the city below collapsed inward. The Tyranids were done with infrastructure. Buildings were being broken down into component materials and absorbed. By the time we reached orbit, New Canaan no longer existed as a recognizable structure. Just another section of spreading digestive carpet, indistinguishable from wilderness and agricultural zones already consumed. Captain Venn ordered immediate withdrawal. No further rescue attempts. To Graven's hope was lost. I wanted to argue to insist survivors might remain in remote regions, but orbital augurs told the truth I did not want to accept. The planet's biomass was increasing exponentially hour by hour. Every person we might have saved had already been converted into protein fueling the next invasion wave. Our mission had been hopeless before we even departed. Here is what I learned in the years of study that followed. Knowledge that provides nightmares with theoretical foundation. The Tyranids are not a species. They are a collective intelligence distributed across countless organisms, from microscopic spores to titans that stride like mobile siege engines. Each organism is both individual cell and conscious entity, capable of independent action, but always serving the greater hive mind. They do not communicate through language or technology. They are the communication, their biology forming a network that transcends space and operates faster than our best cogitators. The evolutionary engine driving them is weaponized adaptation. Most species evolve through random mutation across millennia. The Tyranids observe a threat, analyze its capabilities, and produce a counter-organism within a single breeding cycle. Encountered las, weapons that burn through chitin. The next wave sports ablative carapaces that disperse heat and reflect energy, facing fortifications with overlapping fire. The swarm produces burrowing organisms that attack from below, or flying strains that drop behind defensive lines. Every battle is a learning experience for them. They are very fast learners. I witnessed this on the shrine world of Catha's Landing. The garrison had prepared extensive defenses based on previous successful engagements. They studied the tactics, replicated arrangements, trained their soldiers. When Tyranids arrived, they were confident. That confidence lasted 6 hours. The first wave attacked as predicted, throwing themselves against fortifications in apparent standard assault. Imperial guns cut them down by the thousands. Officers congratulated themselves. Then the second wave arrived. These organisms bore no resemblance to the first. They moved differently, attacked from unexpected vectors, demonstrated capabilities that rendered prepared defenses obsolete. The Tyranids had sent the first wave specifically to die, to test responses and transmit data back to the Hive mind. The second wave was the real attack, custom, designed to exploit every revealed weakness. Catha's Landing fell in 3 days. The survivors, what few there were, reported something worse than death. They reported understanding. The horror of fighting Tyranids extends beyond physical capabilities to something existentially disturbing. Most enemies fight for comprehensible reasons. Chaos seeks corruption and souls for dark gods. Orcs pursue combat for its own sake. Necrons wish to reclaim their ancient galaxy. But Tyranids consume because consuming is what they are. There is no ideology to argue against, no leader to assassinate, no homeworld to threaten. They do not hate us. They do not fear us. They simply process us, converting biomass into fuel for endless expansion. We are not their enemies. We are their environment. This makes conventional strategy nearly useless. When facing orcs, the Astra Militarum knows the enemy will prioritize direct combat and can be drawn into killing zones. Facing Chaos cultists, they exploit internal divisions and competing ambitions. But Tyranids do not fall for feints or deceptions. They do not have morale to break or supply lines to disrupt. Every organism is simultaneously expendable and vital. A cell in a body that can afford to lose millions if it gains information about the threat. They attack when attack serves purpose and retreat without shame when retreat preserves resources. They are patient in ways spanning centuries and rapid in ways that overwhelm cognition. They are, in the most literal sense, alien. The fate of worlds follows a pattern. First come subtle signs easily dismissed, ships missing in the outer system, Vox interference, astropaths reporting disturbing dreams. These are caused by vanguard organisms bred for scouting. Lictors infiltrate population centers, observing and cataloging threats. Genestealers establish cults among the populace, not to worship but to sabotage defenses when the swarm arrives. By the time authorities realize what is happening, the planet is compromised at every level. The invasion begins with spore fall. Ships release countless billions into upper atmosphere, drifting down over days or weeks. Some spores are digestive organisms beginning breakdown wherever they land. Others are sensors creating a planet-wide network feeding information to the hive mind. Still others are microscopic eggs that hatch once nutrients are available. The spore fall transforms atmosphere into hostile environment. Air becomes thick with particles clogging respirators. Visibility drops. And most insidiously, spores release chemical signals inducing panic and despair in human populations. The ground assault follows. Tyranids deploy through mycetic spores, massive organic drop pods impacting with crater, forming force and releasing dozens of warriors directly into combat. These initial forces are not expendable hormagaunts. They are precision instruments. Hive tyrants directing assault with intelligence matching human commanders. Carnifexes smashing through fortifications requiring heavy ordnance to breach. Zoanthropes unleashing psychic attacks that boil brains and reduce tanks to molten slag. Defenders reeling from spore fall and genestealer sabotage. Fight an enemy that anticipates every move. The true swarm arrives only after organized resistance breaks. Millions of lesser organisms pour across the surface, flowing around obstacles like water, washing over defenses in waves that seem endless. Each creature is relatively fragile, easily killed by massed las fire. But they attack in such overwhelming numbers that ammunition becomes the limitation rather than killing capacity. I have watched veteran soldiers who faced Chaos Space Marines without breaking collapse into catatonic shock when confronted with the sheer biomass of a feeding swarm. The horizon disappears beneath a tide of chitin and teeth. The air fills with screeching, inducing nausea and disorientation. Above it all, the hive mind's psychic presence presses down like physical weight, drowning individual thoughts and replacing them with the swarm's collective hunger. What happens next is the horror few outside the Ordo Xenos understand. Tyranids do not occupy captured territory. They digest it. Rippers, small serpentine creatures with oversized mouths, swarm across every surface, devouring anything organic. They eat the fallen, friend and foe alike, making no distinction. They eat plants, insects, bacteria in soil. They eat furniture and clothing, paper and wood, anything breakable into usable proteins. Larger haraspexes follow, massive jaws grinding through harder materials, reducing bones and structures to particulate matter for easier absorption. Harvested biomass is transported to digestion pools, vast organic cauldrons grown from modified capillary towers. These pools are biochemical factories, breaking collected material into component molecules and reassembling those molecules into new Tyranid organisms. A single pool processes thousands of tons per hour, operating with efficiency that would make the Mechanicus weep. The pools steam and bubble with constant activity, releasing vapor that smells like rendering plants merged with chemical factories. Around them, birthing chambers pulse with developing organisms fed directly from digestion, growing at rates that violate thermodynamic principles. A Tyranid warrior goes from conception to combat readiness in less than a day, emerging fully formed and instinctively aware of its role. The end stage is when the planet itself dies. After every scrap of biomass is collected, after cities are consumed and oceans drained, Tyranids deploy final harvest organisms. These burrow deep into the crust, extending root-like structures leaching minerals from rock itself. They tap geothermal energy, draining core heat for final synthesis stages. Atmosphere is stripped of useful gases, leaving thin remnant unsuitable for life. Water is extracted, broken into hydrogen and oxygen, fueling bio-ships' organic engines. When the hive fleet departs, it leaves a dead rock stripped of everything that made it capable of supporting life. The Imperium classifies such planets as perditas, utterly lost. Quarantined for 10,000 years on the assumption nothing will grow there within any useful time frame. Think about that. 10,000 years. The entire span of the Imperium's existence. That is how thoroughly the Tyranids erase worlds. The strategic implications terrify military planners more than tactical challenges. Each consumed world provides resources to create more organisms and genetic information to make those organisms more effective. They are literally growing stronger from our resistance, incorporating successful traits from species they consume and discarding ineffective strategies. Later invasions display counter tactics specifically designed to overcome defenses that worked in earlier encounters. The swarms are learning not just within individual battles, but across the entire species' collective experience. Every victory we achieve potentially teaches them how to defeat that strategy in future engagements. We are training our own extinction. Consider the Cryptman line, a cordon sanitaire established by radical Inquisitor Cryptman to halt Hive fleet Leviathan. Cryptman ordered exterminatus of dozens of worlds in the fleet's projected path, sterilizing them so Tyranids would find nothing to consume and be forced to divert. The strategy worked, technically. Leviathan altered course, but the Tyranids adapted. They began extending tendril fleets into the dead zone, small splinter forces operating without significant biomass replenishment, investigating why expected resources were absent. When these tendrils encountered the next inhabited systems, They attacked with ferocity and efficiency, suggesting the hive mind had analyzed Krypton's strategy and developed countermeasures. The Tyranids learned that humans would destroy their own worlds to deny the swarm resources. They adjusted their approach to account for this tactic. Krypton's gambit bought time, but educated our enemy in the limits of our willingness to sacrifice. The psychological impact extends beyond directly threatened worlds. Across the Imperium, billions live with knowledge that something exists beyond the galaxy's edge, viewing them as nothing more than food. This manifests in cultural pathology, apocalyptic cults preaching inevitability of consumption, paranoid witch hunts seeking Junistela infiltrators with more enthusiasm than evidence. The ecclesiarchy struggles providing theological comfort facing an enemy that does not oppose the emperor's divinity, but simply does not acknowledge it as relevant. How does one preach faith and redemption to a species that does not comprehend either concept? I have spoken with survivors of Tyranid invasions, those few who managed evacuation before their worlds fell. They describe specific trauma distinct from wounds inflicted by other enemies. Fighting orcs or chaos is terrifying, but comprehensible. You understand why the enemy wants to kill you and can find meaning in resistance. But fighting Tyranids strips away that meaning. You realize, on a visceral level bypassing rational thought, that your death does not matter to them. Your bravery, your sacrifice, your loyalty to the Emperor, none of it registers as significant. You are biomass to be processed. The veteran who held the line against cornate assault can take pride in his courage, knowing he faced damnation and did not break. But the soldier who watched his regiment consumed understands his courage was just another resource expended before the swarm could harvest his body. That understanding breaks something fundamental in the human psyche. Even those who physically survive remain casualties in every way that matters. The Ordo Xenos maintains research facilities studying captured specimens, though this is among the Imperium's most dangerous work. Tyranid organisms do not truly die. Even completely severed from the hive mind, their cells continue attempting communication, reaching for connection that no longer exists. Researchers report disturbing symptoms, intrusive thoughts not feeling like their own, dreams of vast organic networks and infinite consumption, and in extreme cases, physical transformations as dormant spores activate and attempt to infect new hosts. We study them not because we believe we can negotiate or find common ground, but because understanding their biology might reveal exploitable weaknesses. Yet research yields disturbing insights more often than useful tactical data. Genetic analysis reveals they incorporate traits from species they consume. Tyranids that fed on orc populations demonstrate increased resilience and regenerative capabilities similar to orc biology. Swarms that consumed Eldari worlds display more refined sensory organs and improved reaction speeds. There is even evidence, though controversial, that Tyranids that fed heavily on human populations show increased capacity for tactical deception and strategic planning matching human approaches to warfare. The Tyranids are not just consuming us. They are becoming us, incorporating useful elements of what we are into their evolutionary development. Every world they take provides not just resources but biological templates, genetic information expanding their capability to adapt to any situation. We are improving our enemy with every defeat. Some call the threat the Great Devourer. It represents apocalypse different from dramatic end times scenarios the ecclesiarchy depicts. There will be no final battle where righteousness triumphs. There will be no divine intervention saving the faithful at the last moment. The Tyranids offer only cold, methodical extinction of everything, reduced to component parts and repurposed into more of themselves. They are evolution weaponized and pointed at the galaxy with all the indifference of a natural disaster and all the precision of a designed weapon. Whether natural phenomenon or created by some ancient civilization as biological weapon, the effect is identical. They are here. They are hungry. And they are winning. The Imperium's response has been characteristically brutal and largely ineffective. Entire sectors declared expendable. Populations conscripted en masse into defensive forces, buying time measured in weeks rather than years. The Mechanicus works frantically to develop biological weapons that might poison Tyranids or disrupt digestion processes. But every potential weapon must be tested against captured specimens that might have already transmitted information about its mechanism back to the Hive mind. Space Marines launch deep strike missions to decapitate swarms by killing larger command organisms, achieving temporary tactical victories that do nothing to address strategic reality of an enemy that simply spawns replacements from the nearest digestion pool. We are improvising responses to a threat that planned its assault across millennia of intergalactic travel. The most horrifying realization, the understanding keeping Inquisitors awake despite chemical sedation, is that the Tyranids we have encountered might be merely the vanguard. The Hive fleets that have invaded, Behemoth and Kraken and Leviathan and all the others, might represent only a tiny fraction of total Tyranid mass. They could be scouts sent ahead of the main force, tendrils extended to test the galaxy's defenses and catalog its biomass. When the true swarm arrives, if it arrives, the Imperium's current preparations will be as relevant as a child's sandcastle facing a tsunami. We might not be witnessing an invasion. We might be experiencing first contact with a phenomenon that has consumed entire galaxies and is now turning its attention to ours. There are no good options, only choices between different forms of catastrophe. The Imperium can continue fighting world by world, slowly losing ground. It can adopt extreme measures buying time at the cost of everything the Imperium claims to protect. Or it can hope for unforeseen intervention, some miracle defeating an enemy that has likely overcome countless civilizations across countless galaxies. Hope, in this context, is not strategy. It is surrender dressed in comfortable language. I returned to Graven's Hope 5 years after its fall. Not physically, the planet remained under quarantine, too dangerous for survey missions. But through long-range auger scans and automated probe data, I observed what had become of that world and its 18 billion inhabitants. The planet was dead in every sense. Atmosphere a thin toxic remnant. Oceans reduced to shallow saline pools incapable of supporting bacterial life. Continents scored and barren, stripped of topsoil and vegetation. Reduced to bare rock showing stress fractures from deep mineral extraction. No Tyranid organisms remained on the surface. They had all been reabsorbed by the Hive fleet before it departed for its next target. Graven's Hope was now just another monument to the Great Devourer's efficiency, testament to what awaits every world in the swarm's path. I think often about the old woman in that chapel, the one who smiled with changed teeth before exploding into weaponized flesh. She had been consumed while still alive, her biology hijacked and repurposed, but something of her original consciousness remained long enough to speak that single word. Hungry. Was it her own hunger, or had she become a voice for the Hive mind itself, translating its endless appetite into a term I could understand? Did she suffer during transformation, or did Tyranid organisms include analgesics making the process painless? Does it matter? The outcome was identical regardless of subjective experience. She became ammunition. Her life's sum total, all memories and relationships and beliefs, converted into a weapon system lasting 4 seconds before being incinerated. That is what awaits us all if the Tyranids have their way. Not death in the traditional sense, but something worse. Absorption. Complete erasure of individual identity as we are broken down into components and rebuilt into something serving an alien purpose. The Tyranids do not hate us enough to torture or love us enough to preserve. They simply use us. With the same indifference we might use promethium to fuel a generator. We burn, they extract the energy, and nothing of what we were remains except the contribution our mass makes to their continued existence. It is the most absolute form of extinction imaginable, not just the end of life, but the transformation of that life into the very force ensuring no other life can flourish. The Imperium's propaganda emphasizes humanity's special place in the galaxy, our divine right to rule, and ultimate triumph over all enemies. Preachers speak of the Emperor's protection and manifest destiny of mankind to inherit the stars. But alone in my quarters aboard, whatever vessel carries me toward, whatever war zone requires investigation, I cannot sustain those comforting narratives. I have seen too much. I have watched worlds die, populations transformed from living communities into processed nutrients. I have studied the biological perfection of organisms designed by weaponized evolution, more efficient than any technology we possess, and I have felt the shadow in the warp, that crushing psychic pressure making clear how small and insignificant humanity's presence truly is. We are not the inheritors of creation. We are not chosen of any benevolent divinity. We are meat that learned to think. And now we face something that views thought itself as just another form of protein to be harvested. The most dangerous emotion in this situation is hope. Hope makes us vulnerable to disappointment and despair when reality fails to match expectations. Hope causes us to waste resources on long-shot gambits instead of focusing on achievable objectives. Hope, facing the Tyranid threat, is a luxury humanity cannot afford. What we need is grim determination, willingness to continue fighting not because victory is possible, but because surrender is unthinkable. Every day we resist. Every world we defend even temporarily. Every Tyranid organism we destroy before it reproduces. These are not steps toward victory, but acts of defiance. We fight because we are human and humans fight. We resist because the alternative is lying down to be consumed. There is no glory in this struggle, no promise of reward, no assurance our sacrifices mean anything beyond brief postponement of the inevitable. But we fight anyway, because the only thing worse than dying on our feet would be living on our knees in the moments before the swarm devours us. I have been assigned to investigate a new development in the Tyranid advance. The briefing was minimal unusual organism sightings, reports from front lines not matching any previously documented behavior. My experience tells me the swarms have evolved something new, some fresh horror designed to overcome our latest defensive strategies. The cycle continues. We adapt, they adapt, and the spiral progresses toward an ending we can see coming but cannot prevent. I will board the shuttle, make the transit, arrive at whatever war zone spawned these reports, and document what I find. The information will be compiled into a report that a few dozen people will read before being archived in some data vault where it will slowly be forgotten. And the Tyranids will continue their advance, incorporating whatever they learned from this engagement into their evolutionary database. Sometimes I dream I am one of them, not a human captured and transformed, but a Tyranid organism born from digestion pools with full consciousness of what I am. In these dreams, I experience the hive mind from inside, feeling connection to billions of other organisms, all sharing sensory information and coordinated purpose. There is no loneliness in this state, no doubt or fear or uncertainty, only purpose, clear and absolute, and the satisfaction of fulfilling that purpose with perfect efficiency. I wake from these dreams feeling contaminated, as though psychic residue from exposure to Tyranid forces has left permanent damage. But I also wake with terrible understanding. The Tyranids are not suffering. They are not conflicted or desperate or afraid. They are, in their own way, perfect. They have achieved what every species ultimately seeks, which is guarantee of survival through optimal adaptation to environment. They have become evolution's masterpiece, and we are simply the raw materials from which the next iteration will be constructed. The galaxy is dying. The long decline that began with the Emperor's interment accelerates with each passing century. The Imperium fractures under bureaucracy and corruption. Chaos grows bolder, incursions more frequent and devastating. Necrons wake from ancient slumber to reclaim what they believe rightfully theirs. Orcs mass in numbers defying calculation, drawn to increasing violence like scavengers to a carcass. And through it all, the Tyranids advance, methodical and patient and utterly unstoppable. We are witnessing the end of an era, the final stage of a cycle played out across countless galaxies over billions of years. Life emerges, evolves, develops consciousness and civilization, then is harvested by the Great Devourer. The Tyranids are not an invasion. They are an apocalypse, the heat death of biological existence made manifest in chitin and teeth. What should we do with this knowledge? The Inquisition maintains its secrets specifically to prevent the general population from understanding how hopeless our situation truly is. If every imperial citizen knew what I know, social order would collapse within a generation. Who would work to produce goods for an economy, serving a civilization doomed to consumption? Who would bear children to populate a species marked for extinction? Who would maintain faith in an emperor who seems powerless to prevent our destruction? The lies are necessary. The propaganda is essential. The hope, however false, must be preserved because the alternative is immediate chaos. And yet I am required to know the truth, to stare into the abyss of our coming extinction, and continue functioning, continue investigating, continue filing reports as though any of it matters. This is the burden of knowledge the Inquisition carries, the awareness that we are already dead. We simply have not finished dying yet, but perhaps that awareness itself is a form of power. If we accept victory as impossible, then we are freed from constraints that pursuit of victory imposes. We do not need to preserve resources for future battles, because there may be no future battles. We do not need to worry about strategic positioning, because no strategic situation results in our survival. We can embrace tactics that would otherwise be unconscionable, spending lives and material with the profligacy of the doomed. This is the final freedom hopelessness provides, the ability to act without fear of consequences, because all consequences lead to the same ending. I cannot fully embrace that reasoning, though I understand its logic. There remains within me some core insisting meaning exists even in doomed struggle, that how we face extinction matters even if extinction itself is unavoidable. This conviction is irrational, unsupported by any evidence I have gathered, and yet I cannot abandon it. Perhaps it is simply psychological defense, a way for my mind to avoid confronting full implications of what I know. Or perhaps it is something more fundamental, some spark of whatever makes humanity distinct from the biomass we will eventually become. I do not know. I am not wise enough to answer philosophical questions about meaning and purpose. I am only a soldier who has seen things that broke his certainty about the universe. The shuttle arrives to transport me to my next assignment. I gather my equipment, secure my data slates, prepare for departure. Somewhere on a world I have not yet seen, something is happening that requires investigation. The Tyranids have done something new, revealed some fresh capability or strategy, and it falls to me to document and analyze it. This information will be filed away, added to the comprehensive database of Tyranid behaviors the Ordo Xenos maintains. Perhaps someone will find something useful in my report. Perhaps it will contribute in some small way to the Imperium's prolonged survival. Or perhaps it will simply be one more record of our ongoing defeat, preserved for no one because there will be no one left to read it once the swarms finish their work. The pilot informs me we are ready for departure. I seal my environment suit and make my way to the passenger compartment. Through the viewport, I can see the stars, those ancient lights that have watched civilizations rise and fall since before humanity learned to make fire. They will continue burning long after we are gone, indifferent to our extinction. The Tyranids will move on to other galaxies, carrying the genetic legacy of everything they consumed here, including us. Some component of human DNA will persist in their biomass, incorporated into whatever organisms they evolve to face whatever threats they encounter next. It is a kind of immortality, though not the kind anyone would choose. We will live on as fragments of code in an alien genome, our civilization's sum total reduced to useful traits in a biological database. This is the fate evolution has devised for us. Not death, but transformation into something we would not recognize, and that would not recognize us. The shuttle launches, and I am pressed back into my seat by acceleration. Below me, the world falls away. Another Imperial installation on another world, in a galaxy full of worlds, that will all eventually fall to the same hungering darkness. I close my eyes and try to rest, knowing sleep will bring the dreams again. Dreams of unity and purpose and hunger. The hive mind calls to those who have studied it too closely, offering connection in place of isolation, and certainty in place of doubt. It is a temptation, perhaps the ultimate temptation, to stop fighting and simply surrender to the inevitable. But not yet. Not today. Today I will continue my work, file my reports, and contribute what I can to the prolonged dying of my species. Tomorrow I may feel differently. Tomorrow the weight of knowledge may finally break me. But today I endure. That is all any of us can do in the face of the Great Devourer. We endure for as long as we can, knowing that eventually, inevitably, we will fail. And when we fail, the Tyranids will be there, patient and efficient, ready to transform our failure into their continued success. Evolution takes millions of years. The Tyranids perfected it in 1 generation. And now they're teaching the galaxy what perfection costs. They are coming. They are already here, and they are hungry.